I call the member for Solomon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise to talk on the Classification, Publications, Film and Computer Games Amendments, the R18 plus Computer Games Bill of 2012. And I have to say that on the weekend I was very surprised that my son said, "Now, do you know anything about the censorship for these computer games?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, we really want classification. I'm an adult now, and I think that it's important that we have an R rating for some of our computer games." Well, he could have floored me. I mean, here's my son who was very angry with me because I wouldn't let him play Grand Theft Auto because I thought that it was too violent. But now he's an adult. He thinks that he endorses our position on this in terms of having an R rating. The worst, the member for Moncrieff was saying that he also plays Grand Theft Auto. Well, I can't have that same confession. The worst thing that I do is play Sudoku on my iPad. But there are other people out there that are very passionate about it, and I have been contacted by a number of constituents who also endorse the R rating that is being proposed. Currently, the system provides that the highest legally available classification category for computer games is MA 15+, and I think this is the issue that my son had, in that games that are not acceptable for people under the age of 15 are refused classification, meaning that they may not be sold, hired, exhibited, displayed or demonstrated or advertised in Australia. As the member for Moncrieff says, the average age for computer gamers in Australia is actually the average age is 32, and surprisingly, women comprise 47% of computer game players, which does surprise me, and 75% of games in Australia are aged over 18. The developments in both games and gaming platforms in recent times ensure that long gone are the days when computer games were just for children, and we heard the member for Fowler talking about his grandson and using the slate with his colleagues over there when they were at school. Well, I didn't have slates, but I remember the Commodore computer when I was at school, but technology has moved on. Most gaming devices on the market today play DVD films and more broadly can access the internet. With the continuing development of interactive entertainment and its ever-increasing popularity, it makes sense to have gaming classification in line with film and television classifications. Additionally, the rapid development of game graphics and high-definition digital imagery gives rise to images far more realistic and explicit at any time previously. Games are, as we've said, interactive, and in many respects, the allure of gaming is a personal matter. Some play to engage with other gamers in battle of wits, others seek to just step out of the real world into a world where they have the controls and are able to make the choices. Some just like the entertainment and relaxation offered by simply playing a game. Regardless of the motivation, the gaming world is one that is not limited to an hour or two window, but one can enter and re-enter as often as people want, and for whatever period of time they wish to. A vast difference from the limitations associated with just watching TV or a film, where you have a limited time and you put the buttons on and restrict. Without the R18 classification, games meant for adults are currently rated at MA 15+, thus making them available to minors and confusing parents and carers who try to manage access to such games. Clearly, the R18 classification, given films as an example, relates to the level of violence, language, nudity, drug use and adult themes. This rating provides a clear guideline for adults to make informed decision. No less for the gaming world. I believe adult games should be restricted to adults. Additionally, introducing an 18+ classification allows parents a better opportunity to assess game content and suitability. It allows adults the freedom of choice and it prevents people under the age of 18 purchasing adult games. At present, some degree of self-regulation has occurred for the Australian gaming marketplace, where games which would ordinarily be classified as R17 and R18 plus in other parts of the world are being modified and classified within the MA15 plus category. Unfortunately, in some circumstances, adult themes beyond the game remain, and the potentially harmful or disturbing content remains accessible for people under 18. With an R18 plus classification, these games could be placed in a more appropriate category. Australia is the only Western country that does not have an adult R18 plus classification for games. The UK, the EU member countries, the USA and New Zealand all have adult classifications for computer games. Grand Theft Auto that we've already talked about, but Grand Theft Auto 4, a development of the original Grand Theft Auto game and a series of games with a huge player following, is an example of self-censorship by a game developer. This particular game came to the Australian market with the removal of stimulated sex scenes, pools of blood and a reduction in the visible representation of injuries. That's part of the reason why I wasn't happy for my son, who was under 18, to have access to that game. Resulting from these admissions in the game was given an M15-8 classification. The game still includes the ability to murder, blackmail, fight, steal, extort and bribe. The high-impact game also exposes players to mature themes such as prostitution, gambling, drug use and gang violence. Now, in the United Kingdom, the original version of this game was given an 18+ adult rating. In New Zealand, it was given 18+, and in the European Union, member countries, it was given 18+. Yet, in Australia, the game is and was available to 15-year-olds. Even with the alterations or omissions to the game for the Australian market, this example qualifies why the current classification system needs to be modified. Parents, friends, members, relatives and friends and carers, when purchasing a gift for a person under 18, it gives them the ability to review the suitability of games for a child under 18 so they can play. They must have a mechanism whereby they can evaluate the game content and whether a game has a high-impact adult content to which a young player should not be exposed. Now, unfortunately, it's too often the case currently that people purchase games based on the ratings applied, and in the case of the MA15+, they take the classification on face value without considering the themes or content. Now, it would be my assertion that if Grand Theft Auto 4 was a movie and contained the themes present within the Australian version of this game, it would most likely be an R18+ film. The issue of R18 classification is not an issue for controversy for those concerned with the amount of violence children are exposed to. The bill I see is not about opening the doors to more violence and mature games entering into the Australian market. It's about bringing our game classification system in line with much of the world and providing further capability to assist those people with the responsibility to children, to protect those children from obscenities and profanity. Appropriateness is probably the best descriptive term. This bill seeks to achieve appropriateness for classification. Parents must be able to easily identify if a game is appropriate for their child or not. And currently, parental controls exist on modern computer gaming devices so parents and carers can censor games to an extent. Within Australia, there are 25 major gaming development studios supporting an industry worth a predicted $2.5 billion annually. This industry has a far reach and needs the support of a clear and appropriate classification system, one that reflects comparative standards internationally. The impact of this legislation will have an impact on our society, but also to the individual gamer. The support for this bill from the gaming community was overwhelming. As I said, I have been contacted by a number of constituents. The consultation report released in November 2010 reported that 98% of the 58,437 submissions in respect to introducing an R18+ rating were supportive. A Galaxy Research telephone poll reflected that 80% of people contacted support the introduction of an R18 classification. Steve Buick, a member of the Darwin Gamers Association, has been in contact with my office regarding this classification. The gaming community of Darwin want this change. They see the value of an R18+ classification. This bill will give consumers both the freedom and protection they deserve. In conclusion, I echo the words of Steve Buick. The computer gaming community in the top end want an R18+ gaming classification. For too long now, the Australian gaming industry has been held back by classification laws. It's pretty clear to us that some games which get classified as MA15+ are too violent for 15-year-olds. There needs to be another classification level. Games which are modified to meet Australian standards do not always have the same content quality. Adult computer games are being censored by the classification board, but the fact is that these games are not designed or marketed to 15-year-olds for an MA15+ classification. They're computer games for adults and as such are labelled accordingly. There are games in Australia which 15-year-olds can purchase. They can purchase that you have to be 18 to buy in New Zealand or the UK. Computer gaming is a form of entertainment which is very similar to television and film. The fact that two classification systems are so different highlights the need for a change. I believe an R18+ classification will help parents buy more appropriate games for their children. We need an R18+ classification. So, being a good member and representing my electorate, I'm actually going to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.